Welcome back to the Angry Ewok channel, and today we're going to do an Armada tactics video about something that I call tailing. A lot of people call it a trail ship. A lot of people call it a hook ship. It's a tactic that, is called by many names, but is pretty useful. This is aimed towards new players and maybe intermediate players. I'm sure most advanced players understand this concept very well. It's come up a couple times in some of my recent games, and so it just got me thinking about it. We'll start off with the textbook example of tailing and hooking, and then we'll move on to some in-game examples of this and try to break it down, how it's applied, how I try to apply it in my games, and how successful I was or wasn't at doing that. So this is going to be our textbook example, and this is two Imperial ships facing off against two Rebel ships. And for this example, the Imperials will have first player. So, key point here. In order to have a good trail ship or hook ship, you need to be second player, and you need to have even activations. And the reason for that is you're going to attempt to force the enemy's last activation to make a choice. So, we're going to be trying to prevent the last ship to go, which is usually the most, if you're trying to last first or set up a short range shot or set up some sort of critical activation, usually the last activation from the first player is his most important ship. You're trying to force a decision from that ship as the second player. The Rebel player is going to try to squeeze the Star Destroyer into making a choice to either commit to the attack against the MC-80 or committing down against the CR-90. And Armada is a points game. And so a lot of times what happens is a Star Destroyer will make the choice to go after the the MC-80. And the reason for that is it's worth more points. Killing that will probably win you the game. Sending a Star Destroyer down into the corner to go fight a CR-90 probably kill it, but then take itself out of the main fight. It's not usually a good trade. So you always got to keep in mind that your trail ship and your hook ship tends to work best if it is a fast maneuverable, cheap ship that has long range. And so all those factors together make a CR-90 an excellent trail ship. You could also do something like this with like an HIE Raider, though it's not nearly as good at that. You could do it with an Aquitaine. But the keys to success, the formula for a good trail ship, is the ability to be cheap, the ability to hit from a long way away, so that and we'll get to why that's important in a minute, and the ability to change a good nav dial never hurts. It's not mandatory, but it helps a lot. As the two fleets close on each other, the Raider will probably be the first activation because he's not quite as important as a Star Destroyer, so he'll move. And then in response, the MC-80 will move. And the Rebel player will probably do this because he's trying to hold the CR-90 off to be his last activation. And he's he's two activations on two activations. It's even activation. So there's a distinct benefit in doing that because he can squeeze the Star Destroyer into making the choice. And so now the Star Destroyer has to go, and he'll either choose to go in on the MC-80, to go in on the CR-90, or he'll try to split them. And that's not really a good option, but we'll illustrate it for these purposes. So let's say that the Star Destroyer goes in on the MC-80. So he'll try to close to try to get a blue range shot, possibly a double arc, and do something like this. At this point, the Rebel player has to be thinking, okay, well, the CR-90 is probably not going to die from side arcs of a Star Destroyer. And this Star Destroyer is running fast. He's probably going to try to hit this MC-80 and fly away from me. And so unless I want this CR-90 to be dead weight and useless points, he needs to get in the fight. So he needs to become very, very aggressive and start attacking. And then if he were to go to the middle, if the Star Destroyer were to slow up and kind of keep them both inside his front arc to try to utilize like gunnery teams or something, this is something a Simon might be a little more likely to do. But even then, it's not usually a good play because you're watering yourself down. You're not hitting with a big dice pool here. Like I said, Simon might do this. IC2 probably not, because 4 red dice against the side of an MC-80, not that dangerous. A 4 red dice against a CR-90 at red range can hurt it, but not bad. So he would probably end up not getting either of the ships here. And then the other option is to come down onto the CR90. He would probably slow up to speed 2 and turn like this to try to cast as broad a net as he can to catch the CR90. Because if he comes forward more than about speed 2 without some inside turning or something like that, it's probably going to end up in blue range. We all know a blue range shot from a Star Destroyer is probably not, depending on what that Star Destroyer has, it's not survivable for a CR90 in a lot of cases. So that's the choice we're forcing here. And just like we said earlier, if the Star Destroyer goes after the MC-80, then the CR-90 has to get aggressive. Now, if the Star Destroyer chooses to come down on the MC-80, on the CR-90, the MC-80 has to become aggressive and get into the fight to try to punish the decision that was made. And so you're presenting two options, neither of which is good. And the important thing to remember here is these two rebel ships are close enough to each other that they can support each other. And there's a term for this. There's a tactical term called supporting distance. And basically what that means is the distance at which two elements can mutually cover each other, and one unit can't be attacked and overrun without the other one being able to help it and try to address that threat. If these two ships are too far apart, they're useless to each other, and this tactic is wasted. But in this example, they're both close enough and at speed that they can support one another and force a bad choice on the Star Destroyer. If the Star Destroyer goes after the MC-80, the CR-90 then needs to be the aggressor and needs to try to line up a shot for next turn. And you got to think, the Star Destroyer is probably going to be the first activation unless there's a good reason not to. So you can't line up to shoot where he is. You have to line up to shoot where he's going to be if you can help it. That's why long range is helpful in this situation. And if you'll see here, this is a potential move from the CR-90, taking the navigate dial, going from 3 to 4, kind of snaking in and getting basically teed up on the side of this Star Destroyer with a double arc on the front. Obviously, it's not really a legal shot because the front, I don't know, front to front, I don't know if the yellow dots would make it. But you get the idea. And the thing is, we're not trying to shoot the Star Destroyer where it is. We're trying to shoot it where it will be. More than likely, this Star Destroyer will go first and try to slide forward. And that will definitely put the side arc into a double arc because it probably won't clear the MC-80, and then you'll be in a good way. That's why long range is so critical with these ships. It's a lot easier to get meaningful shots with a trailing ship if you've got longer range. Something like Demolisher could do it, even though it's a short range ship, but that's just because it gets to move and fire. And then you want to have yourself set up to where you can continue to apply this pressure. You don't want to come in, hit, and be gone. And that's what this little blue line is indicating. It's like if you wait out the Star Destroyer, which you should be able to do unless one of your activations gets killed before it goes this turn, you should be able to kind of slow down and come hard to the right and drop back in on the back of the Star Destroyer, hopefully double arc again. Continuing to make yourself a thorn in his side, just keeping hitting him. The other option is if the Star Destroyer decides to go after the CR-90, you really are going to want to keep speed up so that you can escape. So even if you had I usually deploy at speed 3 with CR-90s, but and we'll say that that's the case. If it's running speed 3 and you have a navigate dial, you really don't want to drop to 2 because you're probably going to want to try to get to 4 here to jump past the Star Destroyer into its side arcs and survive after the next round. So it's really beneficial to do stuff like this inside turn here. This is an inside 3 that drops me in right outside of blue range and angled in such a way that I can get past him and into his side arc fairly easily. It also puts a lot of pressure on the Star Destroyer because I don't know if I have it double arc, but it's close. If it's not, it's pretty dang close to a double arc. off the front, and if he doesn't go first, I can hit him and be gone. And so you're squeezing him. You can't force him to activate first, but you can strongly influence what he wants to activate first by threatening him with good shots. And so you'll probably end up with something like this: the CR90 taking the blue line and trying to get as wide as it can, and trying to probably line up a side and a back arc, double arc on the Star Destroyer if it can, and probably doing navigate dials to try to get back in the fight. And then the MC80 probably doing like an engine tech 2 click at 1, 1 click at 1 at 2, and the click at engine tech 3, and doing basically a 90-degree turn and trying to get back into the fight 2. Don't let your speed cause you to overfly. That CR90 really, if it can get to a safe red range distance of that Star Destroyer's side arc, it doesn't want to go fast because it wants to try to drag its feet and get as many shots as it can before it has to fly away. You don't always want to step on the gas. You want to do just enough to get to a safe spot so that you can help for as long as you can. Because that's the thing about Armada. That's different than a lot of like tabletop war games with, infantry units and tanks and stuff. In those types of games, units are typically able to continually hit the same target from the same angle over and over and over again. Whereas in Armada, because everything's in motion, not only do you have to concern yourself with getting the shot, you have to try to keep yourself in a position to continue to do damage over time as things are moving. And so that's a lot harder when things are flying by you than if you're just, they're in their heavy cover, you're in your heavy cover, and you're trading shots back and forth. So always be cognizant of the speed that you're closing and don't overfly when you can. Now we're going to try to apply that same concept to a real world scenario. This is a game between myself and Louis Andre. I'm on the top. He's on the bottom. I know that fleet looks a lot like the fleet I flew in last week's episode, last week's after action report, but I'm actually on the top. The CR90 on the top right is mine. It's Jaina's Light, and I want to try to use it as a hook ship. I really don't want to come flying in towards that onager because it can zap him pretty easily, and I really don't want to expose him to a lot of fire from that Aquitaine, though it's not as scary as the onager, obviously. But the situation is I'm second player. It's 5 activations on 5 activations, and so because it's 5 on 5, I can squeeze the onager and make a decision about where it's going to go before my assault frigate goes, because my assault frigate is my ship that's most in danger from the onager. It's also my most offensive ship. It's a Mark A with LTTs and disposable capacitors, and it's tricked out to try to be a brawler. I was going to take Salvo, but with an Agate Admiral on it, but I ended up taking 2 braces, so it's pretty tough. So you'll see the red line. That's probably the red line's pretty much the 2 directions my assault frigate will probably take. And then you've got Yavaris. She's probably going to go at speed 3 and do this green motion. And then you'll see Jaina's Light. She's probably going to snake out far enough to keep her safe from the Aquitaine, give it time to clear, and keep far enough away that if the onager tries to come immediately to the right and get guns on her, she can be safe. Because I want to delay the engagement. I don't want to be taking onager shots, and I don't want to engage right now because, as you'll see in a minute when I start put my arcs on my ships arcs are not in good places to fight right now. So I want to buy a turn or 2 with space, with distance, and let my bomber wing get shifted into the yellow circle to where they can be part of the fight as well. And then I want to start grinding all at the same time. I want to overload tokens, and I don't want to come in piecemeal. This is what I suspect the Aquitaines will probably do, these red lines. Aquitaines don't do well out of the front arc like we've discussed previously, so they're probably going to drag. I'm going to try to drag them, meaning stay in front of them and make them try to chase me, and then, show me their side when they feel like they've gotten to a good firing position. But again, it'll take them a turn or two to get there. And the onager will probably come to the right, something like this. But the hook tactic comes in here. So the onager's probably going to be his last activation. The CR90 is usually my hook ship, but in this case, I want my assault frigate to be my hook ship. I want it to react after the onager because it's my most damaging ship. And if he goes after the CR90, hopefully the assault frigate can punish him for it. And if he goes after the assault frigate, hopefully the CR90 can come in and do a lot of damage. So you'll see the assault frigate's potential paths, and we'll see how that goes. So this is the position after turn 1. And you'll see my fire arcs here. My fire arcs are not, I don't have any double arcs. I don't have any really threatening arcs on the assault frigate. But I'm trying to spread out and create an umbrella. And my CR90 is running as hard as it can to get past the onager and into a threatening side of the onager. I'm sitting right outside of red range of that Aquitaine. And then you'll see turn 2. End of turn 2. I'm closing in again. Ended up bringing my bomber wing over, but getting into a shootout with the flotillas and Sienna and Valen. Ended up taking some of those out pretty quickly and dropping his activation count, allowing me to be more reactive. And so here we go again with turn 4. And now I've got the assault frigate doesn't really have any, it only has a front arc shot. But at this point, the onager is committed. It's parallel to his long board edge, so it's going to have a really hard time getting its shots in on the assault frigate. And so my main concern is getting the CR90 to live. And so I'm trying to hit with the CR90, do what damage I can, and keep the onager's attention there. I'm hoping that he'll swing and he'll miss and not quite kill it and spend his time and effort trying to kill it while I can clean up the rest of his fleet. So I'm basically, even though they're very far apart, my assault frigate and my CR90 are still mutually supporting one another, because if the onager goes hard after the CR90, it should open up a gap for the assault frigate and Yavaris to hit him. And if the onager had stayed on target against the assault frigate, the CR90 could have come in behind it and hit it in the back arc and tried to really rack up some most wanted damage with some nice double arcs. So we're just presenting a bad choice. And so we see on turn 5, there's Aquitaines in the way, and we end up clearing out one Aquitaine and not doing enough to kill the other Aquitaine. And Janus Light does escape. Though she gets only a couple shots, you have to be very careful against a salvo ship, especially at blue range with a CR90. And then you'll see at the end of the game, I ended up losing Yavaris, and I ended up killing an Aquitaine and 2 flotillas, and I think I lose an A-wing. Ended up pulling the game off by a 51-point margin. It's a good game. But the concept here was I tried to make the onager make a decision, and it initially decided to go after the CR90, and the plan was to try to get in there with the assault frigate and really make it pay for making that choice. And the only reason I wasn't more aggressive at going after that onager was because there were 2 Aquitaines and 2 flotillas in the way. That's a lot of ships, and I didn't want to get bumped up, and I didn't want to get frozen in place and taking a bunch of hits from those Aquitaines. Just the way the game worked out, it was more advantageous for me to try to chew up the Aquitaines. But I think that the takeaway is that if all my ships had been in one arc of the onager, if they had been clustered together, he would have easily been able to switch targets to whichever target was the most appealing and whichever one was in the most danger. And then he could continue to overload my tokens. But because I was spread out, because I was hitting from 2 angles, but not so far apart that I couldn't concentrate fire on the same target, it forced a bad choice. The onager ended up killing Yavaris. I figured I would lose one of the ships, and it was a spectacular shot. The heavy composite, the count the number of crits you have and do extra damage. shot on Yavaris was amazing. It was he ended up rolling 4 crits in that attack, so he did whatever he did with the shot plus 4 extra damage. And then Yavaris went down the next turn. But so that's an example in practice. And the takeaway, I think, is don't be so set on the target ship that you can't move to a different plan. Like my assault frigate wanted to kill the most wanted target, but had to break out of that. But I was able to keep the Onager from ever getting that super weapon on my assault frigate, and so it lived. Our second example is between two similar fleets. Louis is on the bottom with the assault frigate and the bomber wings and CR-90. I'm on the top with the Onager and the Aquitans and the flotillas. And I'm first player. He's second player. He's got 5 activations. I've got 5 activations. So again, it's a perfect opportunity for a hook ship. And the CR-90 on the right side is going to be the main hook ship here because he can wait out my Onager. I have a long range shot with Cataclysm, but he was flying Kraken. It wasn't going to be a very damaging shot, so he's in no hurry to activate. So he does all of his ships, and I do all of my ships, hoping that he'll get confused or make a mistake or have some reason to move, but he doesn't. He waits me out. And the CR-90 makes a nice inside move and dips inside of the Onager's, super weapon. Once that happens, I could shoot at the CR-90, but it wouldn't do a whole lot. And pretty much for the rest of the game, because I didn't commit to trying to go after that CR-90, and because of its speed and my speed, because I wanted to get into the fight after the assault frigate, I just have to accept that this CR-90 is going to pester me for the rest of the game. And you'll also see, I have my Aquitin circled in red out here. It's trying to turn the enemy fleet back towards the inside. And it does that. It does turn it back to the inside. But I really lost out on some shots with that Aquitin because I was too wide. This is an example of me getting outside of supporting distance. That Aquitin was too far out. Had he wanted to pounce on that Aquitin and fly away from most of my stuff, I think he could have. I don't know that he would have gotten as many points. I think he probably would have killed the Aquitin and my TIE fighters or something, but I may have been able to get behind him with the Onager. We did an in-depth after-action report on this a couple weeks ago. If you're interested in the game, check that out. But I wanted to bring that up as an example of getting beyond supporting distance and taking yourself out of the fight. The enemy doesn't have to do that. You did it for them because you flew too fast, too far away from the rest of your people. So you'll see turn 3. You see that CR-90 has already gotten behind the Onager. It's sitting in a great position to continue to pester, continue to pick, and it's supported by the bomber wing and the assault frigate. So it's not only is it in a bad way, in a bad place, but it's in a bad place and in a position to help to lend dice to the token overloading assault of the bombers and the assault frigate. Whereas my Aquitin, it actually missed a red range shot on the assault frigate by a couple millimeters. That could have been helpful, could have helped bring that assault frigate down faster because it was too far out. And so that was a misplay on my part. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you'll come back. Hope you'll watch more of my content. If this was a video that helped you, please come back. If this was a video that you already understood this concept and it didn't really help you, please try to share this with new players. Hopefully that they can see some of these things, because the really seasoned, the good Armada players, they do this instinctually. They don't even think about it. They just do it because they've played for so long and they understand the game that they don't really need to hear this. But this is more aimed at helping beginner to intermediate people who understand the game and understand basic tactics, but now want to transition to getting their whole fleet functioning like a well-oiled machine. That's what these videos are aimed at. And I want to help those people because Armada is a pretty established community, and you go to tournaments and you'll see guys that have been playing for years since launch, and it's pretty intimidating for a new person off the street to pick up Armada and play for 6 months and go to tournaments and feel comfortable because the community has a lot of veterans. And so hopefully these videos can shed some light on some of the things that those veterans know, from just years of experience, and bring those newer players up to speed so our community will grow. So please consider sharing this video with new players if you understand these things already. And we welcome any other suggestions, because the point of these videos is to try to teach and instruct new to intermediate players on the finer